Jay-Z accepted the Dr. Dre Global Impact Award at the Grammys this past month, and he gave a speech that had the internet abuzz for the next week or so. But he wasn't up there alone. He brought and Beyonce's daughter, Blue Ivy, on stage with him. The average 12-year-old kid would be peeing themselves up there. But this is not her first rodeo. In fact, Jay-Z alluded to that in the speech. Blue Ivy already has a Grammy. She won in 2021, along with her mother, Beyonce, for the music video for the song Brown Skin Girl. She's the youngest Grammy winner of all time. Maybe it'll be her only one, but would anyone be surprised if she won another one at some point, given that her parents are two of the most famous musicians ever? I don't know what the future holds for Blue Ivy. Maybe she'll decide she wants a music career. Maybe she'll opt for a regular life and go be a car insurance saleswoman or something, or a third grade teacher, or a music commentary YouTuber. But if she does decide to go into the arts, she'd join a long line of kids of celebrities who tried their hand at something their parents or other relatives were very good at. Jaden Smith, just like his dad, Will Smith, has a successful career as both a musician and an actor. And his sister Willow has a career in music too. Diddy's son, King Combs, has had some success in the rap world. Johnny Depp's daughter, Lily Rose Depp, just had her breakout moment, starring in the short-lived TV series The Idol alongside The Weeknd. Maude Apatow, the daughter of director Judd Apatow and actress Leslie Mann, has won people over as Lexi on the TV series Euphoria. I could hit my normal word count for a video just listing off the kids of celebrities who are doing the thing that their celebrity parents got famous for. In 2022, internet discourse over the nepo baby broke out into a frenzy. Of course, the concept of an entertainer being the child of a famous entertainer is not new. Charlie Sheen, for example, and his brother Emilio Estevez are both the sons of Martin Sheen, who was a famous actor in his time. But as the gap in our society between the haves and the have-nots continues to widen over recent years, the conversation around nepo babies is about opportunity. There's no denying that in most cases, being the child of someone famous in a field will make it much easier for you to go into that field and succeed, or at least give it a try. Whether that's just because of connections, or money, or perhaps there is a certain genetic talent that you possess and pass on, is up for debate. This conversation happens less in the sports world, where there are children of professional athletes succeeding all the time, because that success is considered to be tied to physical prowess and performance on the field. Ken Griffey Jr. and Barry Bonds, two of the greatest baseball players of all time, are both the children of former major league players. But it's not like teams signed them just because their dads were good. In fact, they were both way better than their dads. Star quarterback Patrick Mahomes is also the son of a former MLB player. People don't question their positions because of their parents' success. Instead, they say, no wonder he has an arm like that. His dad was a pitcher. No one is surprised that Bronny James is playing basketball at a competitive Division I program. He shares half of his DNA with LeBron James, after all. But there's something different about the arts, where things are much more subjective. It's easier to see how an opportunity would be gifted to a relative over someone that is perhaps more deserving. And this happens all the time in entertainment. Of course, some people can maneuver through that opportunity better than others. Perhaps that's because of an innate talent or a stronger work ethic. I could make an entire video about celebrities' kids who failed in the art that they pursued. Perhaps the ones who succeed, their family was better at propping them up. Either way, there's one rapper that I can think of who's done a better job of grabbing the reins that his family ties have afforded him than anybody else I can think of. And that's two-foam baby Keem. Keem Carter was born in Carson, California in 2000. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. According to Keem, his father was never around and his mother struggled with alcoholism. As a result, he went to live with his grandma in Las Vegas, where he spent most of his childhood. He talks about it in his lyrics, especially on Trademark USA, the intro to his latest album, The Melodic Blue. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before he was even in the position to have a debut album, Baby Keem was just like us. He was on the internet, trying to get his career going. He had been dropping music since at least 2017, probably earlier than that, even had a Minecraft channel. Around the same time, he connected with a friend of mine named Krishu, who had a song called Tommy buzzing on SoundCloud. Keem asked Krishu if he could hop on Tommy, and Krishu said no, and I know he regrets that to this day. But his music is fire, you should check him out. Anyway, that just goes to show where Keem was at in his career at that point. He was talented for sure, but he wasn't like jumping off the page with millions of SoundCloud followers, labels breathing down his neck. Where Keem differs from you and I, of course, is that his cousin is Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick is inarguably one of the biggest artists on the face of the earth. And around the time that Baby Keem was DMing Krishu on SoundCloud, Kendrick was arguably at his peak. He had just released his album Damn, which didn't just win Best Rap Album at the Grammys, it won a Pulitzer Prize. Not just a critical darling, the album also featured his highest charting single ever, Humble. You know when your mom or dad or grandma is like, oh, you want to do this as a career? Well, your cousin works in that field. You should reach out to them and get a job. I feel like that's a pretty common experience, but it's not every day that your cousin in that field is Kendrick Lamar. So as the story goes, according to Keem, he emailed the label that Kendrick was on at the time, Top Dog Entertainment. He did an interview in July of 2018 with Pigeons and Planes. We'll talk about this interview a lot. And when he was asked about how he was connected to TDE, he said he emailed them a pack of beats, and it so happened that one of them got placed. That one placement was on the soundtrack for the movie Black Panther, which Keem's big cousin Kendrick was in charge of putting together. The Black Panther soundtrack was released on February 18th, 2018. And Keem produced the song Redemption Interlude by Zakari. Keem is listed as his government name, Hakeem Carter, and is also in the credits as the recording engineer on the song. The Black Panther album was mostly recorded while Kendrick was on his tour for the album Damn, which happened in the summer and fall of 2017. That's most likely where this legendary pic of Keem and Kendrick at the computer working together comes from. It also lines up with one of Keem's bars on Family Ties. I'm grateful for Man. That's Kendrick, by the way. He called himself that on Humble, but that's his childhood nickname because he was very mature at a young age. He opened up doors, a bunk on the tour bus to come and compose. So putting the pieces together, at some point in 2017, Keem reached out to Kendrick or TDE and was like, hey, I got some beats. Kendrick said, cool, come on tour with me then. And it was there that he got to put in work on the Black Panther soundtrack and eventually land that track with Zakari. But it wasn't just Redemption Interlude that Keem was able to land a placement on. Around the same time, fellow TDE rapper J-Rock was working on his album, which, confusingly, is also called Redemption. J-Rock had a huge moment on the soundtrack with King's Dead, which was then taken from the soundtrack and put on his own album too. Since J-Rock's project was likely being worked on around the same time as the Black Panther soundtrack, it goes to reason that some of the beats Keem was working on would circulate to other TDE artists. When you work on an album, especially one as high profile as the Black Panther soundtrack, there are going to be a lot of songs or ideas that don't make it to the final version, but they may find life on another project. I can't say for sure that that's what happened here, but I would guess that these songs were all made around the same time, regardless of which project they were intended for. So Keem, now halfway through 2018 with 3 TDE placements under his belt, picked up where he left off with his own rap career and released the project Hearts and Darts. Listening to it, you can see the lineage to where Baby Keem is today. He clearly started finding his sound right here. He said as much in the interview he did with Pigeons and Planes. Hearts and Darts is simply me, Baby Keem. 6 songs, nice, short, and simple. It's what my ear likes. It has the personality that Midnight, his previous EP, lacked. He's on here calling himself Two-Phone Baby Keem. This interview is key to understanding Baby Keem's approach to his impending fame. He's introduced as a man of few words, who, at this point, has remained mostly a mystery. They said he came out of nowhere to work with TDE, although of course, as we know today, it's a little more complicated than that. The interviewer asked him how he first got into music, and Keem says, I was raised around a talented family. All my older uncles and cousins rapped, so being around it so much, it came naturally. No kidding, man. One part of the interview I find so interesting is the writer asking, do you ever plan on revealing your identity? Despite the interview being listed under his government name, Hakeem Carter. The picture used is dark to the point where it is kind of making it hard to see what Keem looks like. So in that sense, he is shrouded a bit, but at the same time, his name is right there. So what identity would he be revealing? When it comes to truly anonymous projects, like the band Saul, where the full lineup of artists is considered a mystery and has never been publicly revealed, even though people are pretty sure who the singers are, usually they aren't telling you their government name in an interview or doing interviews at all. So his identity is already revealed, unless there was a part of his identity that wasn't public information yet, and that's what the interviewer was alluding to. It makes me think that the interviewer knew that Keem was Kendrick's cousin when he did the interview. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. It's just a guess on my part, and it could just be hindsight. I also find Keem's answer to the identity question in the interview very telling. He said, when I feel that the time is right. Keem has shown himself to be a calculated guy. He knew that running out with his arms above his head, shouting from the rooftops, I'm Kendrick's cousin, was not going to be the best approach to building a career that has longevity and a fan base that truly cares about him. He did another interview with the blog Fashionably Early in September 2018. Shout out to them because they were also the first blog to ever cover my music. When they asked Keem about where he came from, he said, can't really explain. Been back and forth so much, I feel like an alien from outer space. It seemed like by the time he did that interview, he locked in on the whole mysterious thing a little harder. So let's watch exactly how he rolled that out over time. He said at the end of that Pigeons and Planes interview that he had a project coming soon with Cardo. And if you don't recognize the name Cardo, you definitely recognize some of the songs he's worked on. He's a producer with some insane credits. God's Plan, Goosebumps, That Part, and that's just scratching the surface. Obviously, being tapped in with a guy like this is a huge advantage for a rapper who's just starting to find himself. The result was a project called The Sound of Bad Habit, which is the earliest of Keem's work that's up on streaming services to this day. This tape got a few blog posts when it first came out, but the steam really picked up when Keem dropped a video for the song Gang Activities, which was directed and edited by Shia LaBeouf. How these two met is unclear, and I'm not sure the story has ever been told on the internet. I tried to find some explanation. I got nothing. This video showed Baby Keem to a lot of people. It seemed like the strategy early on was to use connections that Keem may have gained through Kendrick, working with Cardo, videos shot by celebrities, but to not publicly talk about that big connection. As we'll see later though, the artistic collaboration between Keem and Kendrick was already going on at this point. Keem built off the momentum of Sound of Bad Habit with Die For My Bitch in 2019, which was the project that really pushed him to the next level. This was when I became a Baby Keem fan, and still before it was common knowledge that he was Kendrick's cousin. This project, top to bottom, is awesome. I revisited it while I was making this video. Hasn't aged poorly at all. He developed a sound, still bringing that banger energy, but expanding on it with some more singing and even like some rock influences. Cardo again returns on the production side, but so do some other TDE associated heavyweights like Soundwave, Cal Banks, DJ Dahi. This tape was Keem's breakout moment. Top to bottom, people were eating it up. The song Orange Soda even went on to become a hit in its own right, and it actually charted on the Billboard Hot 100 about 6 months after it came out. I remember being fully on the hype train late 2019. Keem announced a tour for the album, and I got my tickets, and they weren't easy to get. It was at a venue called Baby's Alright in Brooklyn. For those who aren't from New York, Baby's Alright is a pretty popular venue in Brooklyn. It's seen a lot of artists, come through and then become a lot bigger. If you go to one of those shows where the artist is hot, you expect to see a lot of label guys, A&R types in the crowd. It has a capacity of only like 220 though, so those shows are always packed. And the Keem show was no exception. There was a star-studded audience there. In fact, I spent a great portion of the show standing right next to Lil Dicky. During the song Mosh Pit, where Baby Keem is like, I am 50 Cent, I am 50 Cent, Lil Dicky and I like turned to each other and said it to each other, which is just like such a random occurrence, but honestly kind of a cool moment. It's also really cool to think about in retrospect because this show was late 2019 and the first season of Dave premiered in March 2020. That first season, the soundtrack has 3 Baby Keem songs on it, all from Die For My Bitch. So it's pretty cool being able to personally confirm that Lil Dicky was a fan of Baby Keem. He knew all the words. I saw A$AP Rocky outside the show too. I only bring this up to show what kind of a phenomenon there was around Baby Keem in late 2019. His shows were packed, selling out, filled with celebrities. Like everybody knew he was next. At some point around this hype, in late fall, former TDE co-president and Kendrick's manager, Dave Free, reportedly left TDE to focus on Baby Keem's career full time. In March 2020, Dave Free and Kendrick launched their own company called PG Lang. There was a 4-minute announcement video starring Baby Keem and Georgia Smith. So after this, Keem spent most of 2020 just like the rest of us, inside of his house, preparing for whatever was coming next. Orange Soda was still growing, and more people were finding out about him organically every day. So there was no need to rush into his next project. But he gave us some teasers in August 2020 when he dropped a 2-pack, Hooligan and Sons and Critics Freestyle. Hooligan is the one that got the video and way more attention, but what he said in Sons and Critics is most important for this. Ho, my cousin elevator in his crib. Whoa, whoa. Ho, my baby picture's probably on his fridge. This is the first time that Keem publicly acknowledged that Kendrick was his cousin. He didn't make it a big part of the story yet, but he set the stage to do just that a little bit later. That Keem waited until he had a Billboard charting single, a presumably massive deal with Columbia Records, and a touring history before he publicly announced his familial relation to Kendrick was very smart. Why? I think a lot of people have talked about this on the internet already, but I want to share my opinion on it. Artist development is not a one-day process. Yes, artists blow up on TikTok every day, but do those artists succeed in the long term? The odds are stacked against them. The best way to scale an artist's career is to take things one step at a time and build genuine fans brick by brick. Look at how Pink Panther has scaled her career since her first viral hit. She didn't run out to do the biggest shows, get the biggest features immediately. They took it slow and they did it right. Baby Keem chose to lay the groundwork with 2 solid and beloved projects, The Sound of Bad Habit and Die For My Bitch. He went on tour and put people in the stands, which was important in 2019, but it became even more important in 2020 when other new artists couldn't do that. People weren't fans of him because he was Kendrick's cousin, they were already fans of him. So when they found that out, they were just like, cool. This runs counter to the way that so many relatives of famous people attempt to get their careers off the ground. It's hard for an actor to move like this because in general we know their last name, so if their dad is the famous one and they share a last name, then there's really no way to slow roll it out. Like if your kid's last name is Depp, everybody's gonna know that's Johnny Depp's daughter acting. So let's look at some other artists who are children of famous artists. Jaden and Willow Smith never had the chance to even try this because they grew up in front of our eyes. King Combs has never hidden the fact that he's Diddy's son. I mean, he looks so much like his dad that it probably would have been hard to pull it off. But most people know that Diddy's real name is Sean Combs. So going by King Combs wasn't exactly incognito. Now, I'm not here to say that King Combs' career is not successful. He's got songs with millions of streams. He was on the Pop Smoke album. But I don't think he does that good of a job of beating the nepotism allegations. I don't really know anything about King Combs besides the fact that he's Diddy's son. I know a lot about Baby Keem besides the fact that he's Kendrick's cousin. So King Combs can get some big features, probably do some club appearances, and certainly make a career out of it. But to have the kind of fan base that Baby Keem has, and the longevity that I think Baby Keem will have in the music industry, the way he approached his birth connections is gonna make that tough to happen. Baby Keem waited to reveal his familial connection, but when he did, he used it to his advantage to create a really interesting narrative. He dropped the song Family Ties before his debut album The Melodic Blue. On top of the man line that we discussed earlier, and the song title itself, the cover art is a family photo that has a younger Kendrick and a younger Keem on it. On the album, he touches on the pressures of being Kendrick's protege. I took the torch, I quit being nice, I took the torch, now I gotta fight. Nobody can tell that story except for Keem. He can't hide the fact that he's Kendrick's cousin forever, so instead of trying to do that and failing, he made it a part of his story. I think that's smart. Of course, this type of career trajectory doesn't come without haters and detractors and people who think he's only there because of blood relation, but there is no way to avoid that, and I think that Keem in 2018 was smart enough to know that. There's a vocal crowd of hip-hop fans who think Baby Keem is an industry plant, or that Kendrick writes all his stuff. There was a period early in his story where people thought it was the other way around, where Baby Keem was actually the one writing Kendrick's stuff. But that doesn't seem to be the case. There are leaked reference tracks of Kendrick on songs that Baby Keem ended up releasing, going as far back as So What on The Sound of Bad Habit. There was a Kendrick reference for Bullies, which is on Die For My Bitch. That one, though, could be explained by an excerpt in an interview the two did together in 2020 for Vice's ID magazine. The rights to ID magazine's brand were sold by Vice to Karlie Kloss at the end of 2023, and now their website just redirects to this landing page. So as far as I can tell, it's impossible to access this full interview, which is really annoying. However, thankfully, there's a snippet of the interview that was posted on a couple other blogs, where Kendrick talks about how Baby Keem got on a DJ Dahi beat that was originally meant for Damn. Dahi has 2 producer credits on Die For My Bitch, Bullies and the song Slice Interlude. I could be wrong, but I'll go out on a limb and assume that Bullies is the song that Kendrick is talking about. The way that they tell the story together in that interview is that Baby Keem stole the beat from Kendrick, playfully, and Kendrick says Keem did stuff that Kendrick himself would have never thought of on it. Now, obviously, hearing a reference track where Kendrick is doing exactly what Keem ended up doing on the song makes you wonder how true that is. Of course, there are a few different ways that this could have happened. One, Keem got a hold of a beat that Kendrick already had a rough idea on, and he fleshed that out into a full song. This feels the most likely to me because it doesn't feel like that reference track was a complete idea. 2, Keem wrote the part that Kendrick ended up singing on the reference track, and when Kendrick didn't use it for Damn, he kept it for himself. This feels unlikely to me because Keem's first public work with TDE came during the Damn tour, so Damn was already out. Makes it unlikely that he was submitting songs for it. And 3, Kendrick heard what Keem did and considered hopping on the song, so he tried it himself, but they ended up deciding not to use the Kendrick feature at that time. Maybe they didn't want the familial relationship to come out that early and they second guessed it. Honestly though, that's a bit of a stretch and that sounds like fan fiction as I'm saying it out loud. The third leaked reference track is for the song 16, which ended up as the outro on the standard version of The Melodic Blue. Kendrick's version is on completely different, stripped down production. But the "My Mama Mad at Me, I Know I F***ed Up" part is exactly the same on both the leak and the final release version. It seems likely that this was something that Kendrick wrote and Keem ended up using after the fact. It is interesting that he's not credited on the song on the album though. It does give credence to people who would speculate that Kendrick might be writing more for Baby Keem than is being publicly acknowledged. And according to the leaker, or at least a Reddit post that says what the leaker said, the song Stats, Rockstar P, Bust Her Up, and the second half of Not My Bro on Die For My Bitch were all written by Kendrick. The leaker says the same for the first half of Trademark USA, Boo Man, and South Africa on The Melodic Blue. People do love to lie on the internet though, so I'm gonna take that with a grain of salt. Nobody to my knowledge has heard the reference tracks to those songs. The likeliest outcome is that Baby Keem and Kendrick were in the studio working on those songs together. They could have been bouncing ideas off each other. Artists do that all the time. I talked about it in the Meek Mill video, but it's a pretty common occurrence for artists to share ideas in the studio. Usually they end up being credited, though just because Kendrick isn't publicly credited doesn't mean he's not getting it somewhere. especially given that Baby Keem is signed to his company. They are in this together. I don't think it's fair though to act like Baby Keem is some puppet who has all the work written for him by his big cousin. The songwriting world is very complex. As someone who has written songs for artists, including some who are on major labels, the process looks different depending on where the artist is at in his career, whether you guys are in the studio together or you're working remotely. I've submitted things where the artist used most of what I did, if not all of it, and I've submitted stuff where the artist took like one melody and kept going with that and I ended up getting credit. I can't discredit or fully disprove that Baby Keem is having his songs written by Kendrick, but if you ask me if I believe that, I think the answer is no. He mentions it himself on Family Ties when he says, "I tell you my past, that shit don't get old, but how could you ask like I don't be writing my raps?" Even if Kendrick was involved more than we may know, it wouldn't really affect my appreciation of Baby Keem as an artist. Ever since the beginning of his career, Baby Keem has been heavily involved in the production process. In that sense, he kind of reminds me of a Kanye West type figure. Not in like grandeur, but in like the way they operate in their music. Kanye is someone who is well known to involve other writers in his music, and that's not just a recent thing. That goes all the way back to the beginning of his solo career. It doesn't take away from the great music that Kanye made, and I don't think it should take away from what Keem gives us either. My goal in this video is not to answer that question anyway. What I wanted to do is look at the meticulous approach that Baby Keem took to handling his familial relationship with one of the biggest artists on the planet. To try and have a career completely separate from your cousin in the same field just to prove that you can do it would be unbelievably silly. It's already so hard for talented artists to get on in today's world. The field has never been more crowded than it is today. But with that being said, he proved things up to a certain point before he started utilizing those connections. And I think that's smart and relatable to me. Now, my cousin isn't Kendrick Lamar, but when I started making music, I actively hid it from my parents. Not because my parents would judge me, it's actually the opposite. My parents are so supportive, maybe too supportive. I know they would want to do everything they could to help me, but I didn't want them to start doing that until I felt like the work that I was doing was really strong. I'm sure they knew I was making music, but my dad found out I was releasing it the same day that I had my first label meeting and I told him about it. Did I sign? No, but I thought I was gonna sign, so I figured it was a good time. I learned a lot in that period. But for my own sake, I just wanted to prove myself first, so I understand where he's coming from. So from the day Baby Keem showed up at his cousin's doorstep, or maybe emailed his labeled beats like he said he did, he played it very smart. He established relationships with the talented people that surrounded his cousin, showed them what he could do, how he could be useful, and then spent 2 years building his own sound and creating his own hype, without the association to his cousin being public knowledge. Did some people know? I'm sure, but I also think the powers that be are smart enough to know that just being Kendrick's cousin isn't enough to make a career off of, without having an immense talent of your own, and Keem has that. He showed his family first, and then slowly expanded. Once he finally told the world, he did it in a curated way that made it a part of his journey. People who already knew Baby Keem weren't mad to learn that he was Kendrick's cousin. It was just adding to the lore of an artist they already liked. People who weren't aware of him were able to see that he could back it up with 2 projects before the Melodic Blue. Even if you're skeptical of Baby Keem and the amount that he himself is putting into his music, you have to appreciate the approach he's taken to developing his story. And with that being said, I can't wait to see what the next project is like.